Masechet Baba Batra, Daf Kof Samech Gimel. Yesterday, we saw the law that when witnesses sign on the bottom of a document, they don't have to sign their signatures immediately after the last line. They could leave one line of empty space. That's okay. It looks normal. And after all, we have a rule that if you write anything that you write on the last line of the document, you don't add anything new there, only a summary, because anything new we're not going to take into account. And therefore, you're allowed to leave one line of empty space. However, you cannot leave two lines of empty space, because then you will be able to fill in. You'll add two more lines, and the second to last line you could put something substantive like, oh, and you also agree that you owe me $1 million. And therefore, we allow one line or even 1.5 lines of empty space, but not two lines, and certainly not more than two lines. Now we're going to look into the details of this law. Ibaya lehu sheneshitin shamaru hen va'aviran or dilma hen velo aviran. When you say that two empty lines make a text invalid, does that mean the line of text with the space between the lines, or only the line itself? In other words, double-spaced or single-spaced? If you're saying two lines, is it just the height of a normal letter? Or maybe you're going to say you need space to make it look nicer, some space between the lines. Also, there's some letters like a lamed that extend up, or a chaf sofit that extends down. And so maybe when you say two lines, it means with the empty space, enough that's normally left between two lines of text. That's the question. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, mistabera dehen va'aviran, disal kadatechen velo aviran, shita achat belo avira lemay chazia, ela shemamina hen va'aviran shemamina. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak gives an answer, not from a tradition, but rather from reason. It makes sense that it should be two lines of text plus the margins in order to make it invalid. In other words, he's more lenient. If it's just two lines of text without margins, only the two lines, then it's still kosher. It's only invalid if it's two plus the margins. Why? Because if you would say that it's only the line of text itself without any margins, then when you say one line of text, right, one line of text is okay, would you even need to teach that? What can you write on one line of text without any margins? There's no space above or below. You couldn't write a sentence. There's some letters that need to go above and below. It's all going to smudge into whatever is on top of it and under it. It doesn't look like writing. You can't write that way. And so there will be no need to say that you can leave a line of space if you meant that the space itself without any margins. That's like right after the text. And so therefore, from the fact that the Braita above says that you can leave one line of text, obviously means one line with the margins. And so we can learn from here that when it says two lines, it means two lines with the margins. And this is conclusive. Rav Shabbetai Amar Mishmeh Dechizkiah Shnei Shitin She'amru B'chtav Yedei Adim Velo Ketav Yedei Sofer. My ta'ama Dechol Mezayef Lav Legabe Safra Azil Mzayef. Rabbi Shabbetai says in the name of Chizkiah, when we say two lines, we mean two lines that witnesses would write in, and not that the scribe would write in. Scribes, because they're experts in writing, they can write smaller. They generally do write smaller than a witness. A witness is just a lay person. Any person can be a witness. And so most people who are not trained in writing so much, they write bigger letters. So this is like college rule would be where the scribes write smaller letters, and regular rule, a lined paper, is what regular people use. And so Chizkiah says, when we say that you can't leave two or more lines, we mean the wider ruled lines of what lay people write, whereas the shorter lines of that scribes write, let's say college rule, if you have two lines like that, that's okay. What's the reason? The reason is because if someone's going to forge a document, they're not going to go to a scribe to help them to forge a document. They're not going to go, if they have a paper that's already written, a document, and it's already signed, and there's two thin lines, college ruled lines, they're not going to go to a scribe and say, hey, scribe, can you add in another couple of lines over here and add in that, oh, you also owe me $1 million and so on? And the scribe's not going to do it because, first of of all, the scribe doesn't want to ruin his reputation. He doesn't want to get involved in something that is illegal. And also, you're not going to go to a scribe, and then he's going to tell other people, oh, you know what, this guy came in, and he told me to add a line to a document that was already signed. So generally, when someone's going to forge something, they do it privately, and they do it themselves. They don't go to a third party to involve them. And therefore, if there's only enough room for 2 lines that only a scribe could fit when he's writing small, then that's not sufficient to forge it, and therefore it's kosher. It's only invalid if it's 2 lines, so now we understand it's 2 lines of wide rule lines, the way that most people write, together with the margins. Good. Bechama. Amar Rav Yitzchak ben Elazar. Kegon lech lecha ze al gabe ze al makasaba shnei shitin v'arba'a avidin. So now when we say that you have to leave margins, how many margins? How big are these margins? So Rav Yitzchak ben Elazar says, let's say you wanted to write lech on one line and lecha on the next line, or lecha, lecha. It doesn't matter. It's the same spelling. So you'd have to have the regular rule to hold a normal letter like a mem or a hey, but also you have to leave space for a letter that goes up like a lamed. So you need some margin on top of the first line. But there's also some letters that go down like chaf sofit. So you need a margin below the first line. And let's say on the next line you have the word lecha and you're writing the lamed right under the chaf sofit. Well, then you don't want them to overlap, and so you're going to need a margin of empty space above the second line, and also if you write a chaf sofit on the second line, you need below the line. And so therefore altogether it's 2 lines of text, meaning the main text, and 4 areas of empty space, right? 4 areas of empty space. One above the first line, below the first line, above the second line, and below the second line, so that you can write extended letters both on the first line and on the second line, even if they are one right on top of the other. That's the first opinion. Rav Chia bar Ameh Mishemeh De'ula Amar, Kegon lamed milma'ala v'chaf milemata, al makasaba sheneshitin ushlosha avirin. Rav Chia bar Ameh says, no, a little bit shorter, in the name of Ula. For example, if you'd write a lamed on the top line and a chaf on the lower line. In other words, you don't need to have 2 empty spaces between line 1 and line 2, because how often are you going to need to write a chaf sofit on the first line and a lamed on the second line? If that comes up, just move the letter over a little bit, right, to the right or to the left, so that you can fit it. And so you can write very clearly and nicely, even if you leave only 1 margin between line 1 and line 2. And therefore, according to him, it's the space of 2 lines of text with 3 margins, 1 above the first line, 1 between 1 and 2, and 1 below the second line. Rabbi Abu Amar kegon Baruch ben Levi b'shita achat, kasabar shita achat ushne avirin. Rabbi Abu gives a more stringent opinion than the others, and he says when it says 2 lines, what it actually means is 1 line on which you could write Baruch, and has to have a margin below it, and you have to write the Lamed of Levi with a margin above it. And that's what 2 lines mean. So therefore, according to him, if there's 1 line with 2 air spaces, that is already no good. So when we say 2 lines, what it really means is 1 line with air spaces, which is equivalent to 2 lines. So it's only permitted if it's 1 line with 1 air space, then that's okay, because you can only barely write anything in there. But 1 line with 2 air spaces, that's already too much. Maybe you could squeeze in a bunch of text in there, maybe even 2 lines of text, and so that would be too much. Amar Rav, lo shanu ela ben aidim laketav, ava ben aidim la asharta, afilu tuba name kasher. Rav says, this law that you can't leave 2 lines of empty space, that only applies to space that's between the text and the witnesses of on the main text. There you can't have empty space. However, if you're talking about the witnesses to the ratification, then you can have even more, lots of space. In other words, normally when you have a document, so you write up a document, says you owe me this much money, we write it down, and there's 2 witnesses that are right under the text, or 1 line under the text. Okay, so I hold on to it during the time of the loan, and then when the time's to come to pay the loan, so I bring out my text, it says here you owe me $100. We have to bring it to court first if you dispute it. So I bring it to court, and the court ratifies the document and says, okay, let's make sure that these witnesses really signed it, and we go and ratify that these signatures are true. We find the signatories. Did you sign this? We know someone that recognizes the signatures. After it's ratified, the court writes on somewhere on the document, let's say all the way down on the bottom, where there's lots of empty space, right? There's text on top, the witnesses sign right under. That takes up like half the space of the parchment. And then there's empty space below. So then the court, they could write anywhere on the empty space below. They write, yeah, we ratified this document, and there are signatures to the ratification. So Rav says that if there's a lot of space between the witnesses of the main text, and then below that there's a lot of empty space, and then there's a ratification and the witnesses on the ratification, that's okay. Maishena ben aidim laketav dilma mezeh v'chatav mai deba'eh v'chatime sahadeh ben aidim lasharta nami mezeh v'chatav mai deba'eh v'chatime sahadeh. And so now we ask a question: what's the difference between the space between the main text and the witnesses? How come you're not allowed to have a lot of empty space there? Well, because we're afraid that someone will make a forgery and they'll write whatever they want in it, and they have the witnesses that are already signed on the document. So we don't want people to add more details in the text. So therefore, we put the signatures right under the text, and then you can't add anything else, because if you're going to add some more things under the witnesses, we'll know that this was added after. That's the reason. Well, then that reason should apply also to the ratification, right? Between the witnesses to the text and the ratification that's on the bottom. Why aren't you also afraid that someone will write anything that they want, and they'll bring witnesses to sign that, and then it will look like it's pre-ratified? In other words, we have the original document with witnesses that signed on, and then there's a few inches of space and a ratification all the way on the bottom of the document. What someone could do is that, look, you have a document that says that whatever is on this page is ratified. So they can go and add a whole thing. It says, you owe me $1 million and so on, and then get forge two signatures, and it will look like the ratification is on the second document that's on that page. And then you don't even have to bring it to court. You can just say, hey, look, see, it's already ratified. You don't even have to check if these witnesses really signed it. So that is a problem. So how come Rav says that you can leave empty space there? And the answer is dim tayet le. Oh, it's only okay to leave space there without writing if you ink it in. You can't leave empty space on the parchment that you could write on, but rather you take some ink and you blot it all out so that nobody could write anything there. So that's what it means when you leave empty space, so that we're going to make sure no one writes anything. Well, if so, if Rav only meant when you blot it out, well, then that should apply also to the main text. Why? If you have the main text of the document, and then you blend and you have a few inches of space, and you blot it out, you put ink all over it, and then you put the witnesses after, then that should be okay. But Rav said it's not okay. Rav said there's a difference between the main text and the ratification, and one, you're allowed to leave space, and one, you're not allowed to leave space. So if you say that, if you ink it out, so then that applies to both of them. So you should be able to ink out both of them, and then you wouldn't be able to add anything. So what's the answer? Amre sahadeh atiyutahu dechatime. Says no, it would be a problem to leave space between the main text and the witnesses, because then people will think that the witnesses only signed their names on the fact that you inked this in, right? They're testifying, says, yes, we were present when someone put ink all over here. We're testifying that they didn't cover anything up that was under it, right? Where this is only inked in. But they would not know that they're testifying about the main text that's above that. And so then the main text above that would be invalid, because it's not clear that the witnesses are signing on the text. Maybe they are just certifying that it was inked in front of them. That's why you can't use this ink in strategy to fill up space in the main part of the text. So we ask on that. Ben edim lasharta name amdi bedina atiutehu dechatime. We should worry about the same thing, that if we have a main text with witnesses, and then lots of empty space, and then the ratification, and we ink in all the space in between, maybe also people will think, oh, see, the ratification of the judges, that's only regarding the inking in. The judges are certifying, the Bet Din certifying that this was inked in before them, and we won't know that that the ratification is on the main document. So why don't you worry about the same thing? And the answer is, Bedina tiuta lachatime. No, it's not the way of a court to sign on inking in. That's not the court's job. They don't sit and put their signatures on every little thing. A court's job is to ratify a document. That's what they're writing. On the bottom, we ratified the signatures in this document are real signatures, and you can go and use this document. So therefore, we don't have to worry that anyone would think that they're signing only for the inking in. We would know that the ratification is for the main document that's on the page. But that's not true for the witnesses on top. Sometimes witnesses do certify that, we saw that just about the inking in, and maybe not on the section before that. And so now we understand Rav's halacha. ולחוש דילמה גייז לעילה ומחיק לטיוטה וכתב במאי דבעי ומחתים סהדה ואמר רב שטר הבא הוא ועדיו על המחק כשר. But now we have a new worry. Let's say you have this document that has a text on top with the witnesses right under, and that takes up half the document. And then there's some empty space that you inked in, and then you have the ratification of the court on the bottom. If you have that text, here's what someone could do. They could take this parchment and cut off the top half, cut off the text and the witnesses from the top. So now no one even knows it was ever there. And now what do you have left? An inked portion and the ratification of the court. So you could take the inked portion and erase it, right? You can erase it, you rub out the ink or scratch it out, and then you can write whatever you want on that area and just get false witnesses and sign that, and then you'll present it to the court and say, here, this is ratified. They ratified what the whatever's written on the erased portion. And after all, Rav himself said that if you bring a document with the witnesses signed on an erased portion, it's kosher. Sometimes people, they didn't want to throw out a good parchment. Sometimes if they use parchment for one thing, they would erase it all. It doesn't erase perfectly. You could tell that there something was erased. But as long as the document and the witnesses also are both on the erased portion, that's a usable document according to Rav. And so now we'll have something that you wrote in this way, and it's already pre-ratified. So the court is not even going to check to make sure that these witnesses really signed it. And so this is going to be a big problem. It'll be easy to forge a document. So why don't we worry about that? So we have half an answer. Okay, we have no problem according to Rav Kahana, because he teaches this law that we just mentioned, that you can write a document on erased parchment. He said that that's the opinion of Shemuel. So then that's a different opinion. Shemuel says that, but Rav may disagree and Rav would say you have to use a nice clean parchment that's totally new, and you can't write something over an erased writing. So then you'd have no problem if that's the opinion of Shemuel. However, Rav Tav Yomi teaches this halacha as we just taught it in the name of Rav, and therefore we have a contradiction, because on the one hand Rav says you're allowed to write erase something and write a document on top of it, and it's a valid document. On the other hand, he says that you can have a section on top and leave empty space, and then put a ratification on the bottom with it and it inked in the middle. But then you can cut off the top, erase the inked in part, write something new, and that would be valid, and it would be already pre-ratified, even without the court checking it. But that would be easy to forge. So what are we going to do? Kasavar kol ki hai gavna en mekaymin oto min ha'asharta shebo ela min ha'edim shebo. The answer is, Rav could say, if you have anything like this of an erased document, a document that's written on an erasure with the witnesses also on the erasure, anytime you have a document like that, we do not ratify based on the court's ratification, rather only on the witnesses. In other words, if I have such a document and I want you to pay up this loan that's written on top of such an erasure, so I have to bring it to court and I have to get paid right away. It's not good if the court just signs, we ratified this, and then I could use it later. No, you can't use it later. Every time you bring it to court, they're going to say, well, we don't know what you erased and what you rewrote here. Maybe you rewrote something. And so therefore they have to ratify it again every time that you bring it in court. We don't rely on the signature of the judges that's on the bottom. And so therefore there won't be any problem, because even if you do cut off the top and erase the inked part and write something again, still the next court is not going to rely on the ratification on the bottom. They're going to re-ratify it. ורבי יוחנן אמר, לא שנו אלא בין העדים לכתב, אבל בין עדים להשרתה, אפילו שיטה אחת פסול. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees with what Rav said before, totally different opinion, and he said that this baraita that says that you're allowed to leave one line of a gap, that's only true between the main text and the signatures. You're allowed to leave one line of space. However, according to him, between the main witnesses, the witnesses on the main text, and the ratification, you cannot leave any space at all. Rabbi Yochanan is the exact opposite of Rav. Rav says you can leave lots of space between the witnesses and the ratification. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, not even one space. Now we ask, what's the difference between the witnesses and the ratification, where you say you can't leave any space, but between the main text and the witnesses, you can leave one line of space? The answer is, because if you leave one line of space between the end of the document and the witnesses and the ratification, we're afraid that someone will cut off the main text and the witnesses. They'll cut that all off. And what do you have left? You have one line of empty space and the ratification. Well, in that one line, you can write a document. You can write a document and says, you owe me $1 million. And you can sign on the same line. Put two signatures right after that. And according to Rabbi Yochanan, if you have a document and witnesses all written on one line, he says it's kosher. So because he's lenient and says that you can write a document and two witnesses all on the same line, that leads to a stringency, which is that if you have a document and then witnesses, and then one line and then the ratification, that's no good, because you can cut off the entire top of it with the witnesses also, and leave one empty line with the ratification, and then someone could write in an entire document with the witnesses on that line, and it's already pre-ratified, so that would be too easy to forge. And therefore, Rabbi Yochanan says that the ratification has to be immediately under the witnesses of the main text. So if Rabbi Yochanan thinks that you can write an entire document even on just one line with witnesses on the same line, well, and therefore you can't leave any space at all between the witnesses and the ratification, well then, according to him, you should also not be allowed to leave not even one line of space between the main text and the witnesses on the main text, because here also, maybe you'll cut off the main text, and then you'll have left just an empty line and witnesses. And then you'll write whatever you want on that empty line, and then you'll have a full document, and it'll be too easy to forge. So how come Rabbi Yochanan allows that? And the answer is, Kasabar Hashtad Haba, Hu B'shita Achat Ve'eda B'shita Acheret Pasul. Rabbi Yochanan thinks that if you write the text of the document on one line, and the witnesses on the next line, it's not valid. It's only valid if you write everything on one line. Everything on one line, that's okay. Because how are you going to forge that, right? You wrote the text, and then right after that, so it's clear that the witnesses are pushed over, and they're in that spot, and they left room for the main text. So then that looks authentic. But if the witnesses are on the next line, well then who knows what they were signing on? And so if you have just one line of text and then witnesses after that, we throw it all out. And this is consistent with what we saw before. Whatever's written on the last line of text, we ignore. But that's only when the text is on one line and the witnesses are on the next line. Then you cannot have it. But if it's all in the same line, then it's okay. ולחוש דימה כתב הוא ועדה בשיטה אחת ואמר אנא לרבות בעדים הוא דעבדי. But we should still worry that, let's say you have a main text, one line empty, and then two signatures, which the Baraita said is okay. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, we should worry that maybe you'll cut off the main text, and then what you have left is one empty line of text and two witnesses. Here's what someone could do. They could write the text and two more witnesses on that first line, and then leave the two witnesses on the second line. And then he'll say, oh, look, this is a valid text, right? Because you have everything on one line. Rabbi Yochanan says it's okay. And and the other two witnesses that he put on there also, he said, I wanted to increase witnesses. I wanted to publicize the matter more. And so it'd be very easy to him, for anyone, to cut off the main text. But right, you owe me $1 million, put two signatures, leave the next two signatures there, and then he would be able to forge a text easily. How come Rabbi Yochanan doesn't worry about that? And the answer is, Kasabar kol ki hai gavna en mekaymin oto min ha'edim shelemata ela min ha'edim shelema'ala. Rabbi Yochanan thinks that anytime you have a situation like this, where you have a text and two witnesses on one line, and then just two witnesses on the next line, anytime this is presented before judges for ratification, they have to know that they are going to ratify the document not from the witnesses that are below on the second line, because those might be the original witnesses to some text that was above that was cut off. Rather, they're only going to ratify it if they can ratify the two witnesses that are on the first line of the line with the text, and that way they'll know that if it was forged and someone added a whole line with these two witnesses, then they'll be able to catch them, because they are going to have to ratify specifically the two witnesses that are on the first line of text. So therefore, in other words, if you have a text and then an empty space and then two witnesses, that the Baraita says it's permitted. And Rabbi Yochanan also agrees that it's permitted, because what are you worried about? Is someone going to cut off the main text and there's going to be an empty line and two witnesses. And then someone could write in, you owe me $1 million, and add two false signatures, signature A, signature B. And Rabbi Yochanan says that it is valid. It's true, that is valid. But the judges will know when they come to ratify it that they're going to say, well, maybe you did all that, so we have to worry about that. Therefore, they're going to ratify the document based on only the two witnesses that are on the first line. And if those are good, fine, then it's good, because then they ratified the whole document on one line. That's good. But they're not going to rely just on the witnesses that are on the second line. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.